I studied architecture at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in New York. On my last year, Professor Vasil Yurchenko mentioned that he was consulting on a new hospital in Havana with the firm of Arroyo and Menendez Architects. He suggested that I could be a liaison between both offices. He gave me a letter of introduction to their offices in Havana. During my visit to the Arroyo office, architect Nicolas Arroyo was very pleased with the idea of me being the liaison between his office and Yurchenko's. However, there was a problem with the hospital project. The government had used the allocated hospital monies for a road that was under construction, and there was no hospital and no monies. At that moment, the door to the lobby opened and several persons entered the office carrying boards with color renderings and floor plans. Arroyo said, "This is the competition results for the National Theater of Cuba." He proceeded to explain the different designs, also mentioning that he had been the judge for the competition and that he was going to do the final theater design. He also said that in his opinion, it was absolutely necessary to develop a detailed program for the theater and all of its requirements, including acoustics, lighting, and theatrical adjacencies. I told architect Arroyo at that time I was revalidating my architectural degrees at Havana University and had plenty of time, that at Rensselaer I had a very good training on architectural programming, that I could do the theater program at no cost to him. After thinking about my offer, Arroyo asked me when I could start, and I said, right now. He allowed me to use his own desk, and I started the architectural program for the National Theater of Cuba right then. During the 4 months of program work, I contacted Bolt, Beranek, and Newman acoustical consultants, Siemens electrical lighting control consultants, and several stage equipment consultants. The theatrical consultants of Malmo, Norway, specifically recommended that we should do 2 different theaters, one for opera, ballet, concerts, etc., that require large stage facilities, and a second, much more smaller experimental theater, where a person sitting on the last row could see the tears on the face of the actor on the stage. They also advised that their adjustable audience solution with a movable partition for reducing the size that was being considered, it would not work. By the beginning of October of 1951, I started with the visual angle studies, following the advice that it was very important to be able to see all the time the ballet dancer's feet on the stage floor. By the beginning of 1952, I had, still at no cost to Arroyo y Menendez, developed all adjacencies, sections, and interior elevations of wall and ceilings, with large platforms to reinforce the vocal sound without echoes, All of the January and February of 1952, I developed the exterior elevations and site plans for the National Theater. Still, no funds were available for the theater drawings. On March 10, 1952, Fulgencio Batista gave a coup d'etat in Cuba. All activities were paralyzed. No future was apparent for the National Theater of Cuba. I was surprised when a royal secretary told me that I had a telephone call from architect Arroyo. He told me to gather all the sketches of the National Theater that I have been doing and meet him at the Salón de los Espejos in the Presidential Palace in Cuba. When I arrived to the place where Arroyo was, he asked me to explain why we are needed two theaters. It was easy to me to explain the consultant's input and what I have been doing for the last 6 months, including the different uses and number of seats. At that moment, a large mirror opened and out came a person in white coat and pants that I ascertained it had to be Batista. He said, "Arquitecto Arroyo, please explain to me what you are planning for the National Theater of Cuba that we're going to build." Subsequently, Arroyo proceeded to repeat the information that I had just given him. Batista then asked, "Who is this young man?" Arroyo said, "He is our international theater consultant." Batista asked how much money Arroyo needed for the construction drawings of the theater. Arroyo hesitated. Then Batista told one of his assistants to make a bank transfer to Arroyo's account for a large sum of money. Once funds became available, a new office was constructed on the roof of Arroyo y Menendez building for the National Theater project. The project team had two professional draftsmen, Manuel de Tapia Ruano and Aparicio Paneque. I was the project architect. A number of consultants for the different trades were selected by Arroyo. The general contractor for the theater selected by Batista was Purdy and Henderson, a well-known American contractor with offices in Havana. Soil tests were made and foundation systems were developed using floating foundations, which were used for the first time in Cuba in this project. The first meetings were held on a trailer at the theater site, where I was officially designated project architect for the National Theater of Cuba. Steel trusses were used for the large spans. A precast system of structural beams and blocks was integrated with the trusses to avoid the standard support for reinforced concrete floors. On January 1954, architect Nicolás Arroyo offered me a large increase in salary and a participation on the firm's ownership. I have always wanted to have my own firm, and I counter-offered to Arroyo that I would continue with my work at the theater on the mornings with no change in salary, and in the afternoon I would have my own practice. He accepted. On October 1956, Century Lighting of New York offered to pay my trip and expenses from Havana to New York and back in order for me to learn their theatrical lighting controls and meet with Professor Eisenhower at Yale. Subsequently, Strand Electric of London offered to pay for the trip and expenses from New York to London and back. Also, Siemens of Germany offered to pay for the trip from London to Munich and back. The partial tickets were combined into a new ticket, Havana, Munich, Havana, and included Scandinavian countries, cities of Germany, Amsterdam, Brussels, and Paris. I visited all and new theaters, opera houses, and concert halls. During the day at rehearsals and in the evenings the actual productions. That trip allowed me to easily compare all the different lighting control systems, the unique stage equipment, the new scenery techniques for rear and front projections, the three-dimensional pieces, the acoustics, the visual angles, and many more items pertaining to the operation of the National Theatre of Cuba. On January 1959, when Fidel Castro took over Cuba, he decided to continue the construction of the National Theatre. I was asked to coordinate the work of the construction companies of the theater, Anauco and Coromoto. All of the experiences and knowledge acquired in the trips of 1956 were put to work, like the operation of the Comédie Française to rapidly move scenery in and out of a stage, the front and rear projections of the scenery of the Scandinavian theaters, the acoustics of the English concert halls, the stage elevators and turning platform of the New York and German theaters, the uninterrupted stage visual angles of several European theaters. It was interesting to coordinate the final work at the National Theatre. I had a lighting preset system that could turn off a light on a split second, while the same condition would take 7 seconds at the Opera of Paris and 1 full second at the Malmö Theatre in Norway. The technology in the theater was intended to be the most advanced of the day. During the 9 years that I devoted to the creation of the most advanced theater of its time, I never lost my enthusiasm. History rewarded me with the satisfaction of a job well done.